Commissioner Malone.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and get our goal-setting meeting started. First order of business is approval of the minutes.
I would move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Next up is any changes to our very lengthy agenda. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Number 3, 3.1, review joint Benton County or OSU City of Corvallis COVID-19 communication plan. Are you leading that discussion, Lilia?
Yes, both myself and Steve Clark, who I believe, is here on the line with us as well. We have probably about 5 or 10 minutes worth of information to share with you all, and then we're prepared to take a few questions.
Okay, great.
Steve, would you like to kick it off, or would you like for me to get us started?
Thank you, Lilia. Commissioners, thank you very much, and members of county administration and community who are with us today.
This conference will now be recorded.
Share briefly the very focused work of both Benton County, the city of Corvallis, and Oregon State University as it regards public health communications. That this work really started last spring and continued through the summer as members of my staff, Lilia, and others within the county, and Patrick Rollins from the city of Corvallis all collaborated in establishing a very extensive public information campaign that will supplement the county health department's efforts around public health champions. We all know as people of the county and the nation the importance of communications addressing this pandemic. What we are seeking what we will share with you today, a campaign that has been inching out over the last week or two and begins in full today, Tuesday, September 8th, and will continue through at least fall, and if necessary throughout the academic year as the pandemic continues, and we hope it continues in a much more subdued way as time goes on. We have several goals to attempt to establish through communications. Certainly communications doesn't provide public health, but it communicates how members of our community, regardless of their employment, their age, their gender, their education, or if they are in school or not, can participate as public health champions. Our first goal, and I think Lilia has shared information with you, is to both educate Oregon State students, faculty, and staff, the Corvallis and Benton County community members, and those that commute to our county for work each day about personal health practices to advance their own wellness, and as members of the community, public health measures that can reduce the risk and the spread of the virus that causes COVID-19. It is so very, very important that we do that both within our community and for those that come and go from our community, because we know the virus is portable. We also wanted to establish that our county, the city, and the university are leaders in public health. Unfortunately, we've had a long history of being subject to outbreaks of certain illnesses. Most recently, before COVID-19, it was meningococcal B disease, which we had a 2-year designation as an outbreak status within Corvallis and Benton County, you might all recall. The good news is that this is a county, thanks to your leadership and the work of the County Public Health Department, Lilia, Charlie, and so many others, that is so well prepared to deal with matters of crisis when they occur in public health. Now, we've not seen something like COVID-19 pandemic since the 1918 Spanish flu, but this is a county that you can be rest assured has the capacity to collaborate with the city of Corvallis and OSU, not only in addressing communications, but addressing public health measures. Our second goal, in addition to establishing our capacity and knowledge as leaders, was to be proactive. We do not want to be responsive, so the work of this communications campaign that I'll share in brief some of the tactical aspects, is to get out ahead of things. We also wanted to support the work of the county health department and the city of Corvallis. While the county is licensed to and legislatively and statutorily responsible for public health measures, we know that the city and the university take this as institutional requirements as well. Ultimately, the success of any communications effort is whether or not the public engages in not only taking note of the communications we share, but also the matters of public health that we ask them to participate in. So in brief, the campaign that begins today really will be seen countywide, certainly emphasizing within the city of Corvallis, city of Philomath, where most of our residents do live, on campus at OSU in Corvallis, and we'll have similar campaigns in Hatfield at the Marine Science Center in Newport and at OSU Cascades in Benton. What we really are trying to do is establish that beavers, whether you're a beaver or not, help build a safer and healthier community. So here's an example of that. You will see over the next several weeks hundreds of lawn signs throughout Corvallis and Benton County portraying how we can build a safer and healthier community. Certainly we cannot assure ourselves that we will do that because the COVID is the ultimate decider. But for example, these billboards will provide 7 clues to how individuals in our community can help build a safer and healthier community. Wear a face covering, stay 6 feet apart, limit social get-togethers outdoors and indoors to no more than 10 people, wash our hands, conduct daily health self-checks, stay at home if we're not feeling well, and get tested for COVID-19. And we're, as a university, offering that not only community-wide, but throughout the university in 2 different ways. We'll be testing, as I think I've told you, shared last week, we'll be doing ongoing and continued wastewater surveillance testing in Corvallis. That work has been underway since May, over the summer. This weekend, we'll do COVID-19 random sampling, COVID-19 testing throughout the Corvallis community this weekend. And throughout fall term, we will do trace COVID-19 testing and wastewater surveillance testing on campus in Corvallis, as well as in Benton and in Newport. What we want to share is that the efforts to communicate will continue both within the university and within the community in a variety of ways. We're seeking to publish an op-ed in the Corvallis Gazette-Times this coming Sunday from President Alexander. We'll be sending about 6,000 of those communications to business leaders throughout Benton County next week. We will engage in communications to all of our students. We have a schedule of social media to our students, which numbers over fall term about 40 different social media messages. About half of those are public health related. We'll have digital websites and videos. President Alexander's already recorded 2 videos about this. We have about 15 other videos featuring student athletes, coaches, student body leaders, faculty and staff, and community members portraying the importance of public health measures by each of us individually. In tone and in personality, I think we'll share what Benton County is really about. That we're conscientious people. that we're collaborative, we're determined, we care for all, and that we can personally engage in measures that advance our safety of our community, our own health and wellness, and the health and wellness of others by doing these 6 very simple things that I've shared before that'll be on lawn signs throughout the community. That's a brief overview of what we're doing. Again, our goal through communications and marketing by the city, by the county, and the university is to foster, support, awareness, and engagement in all the multitude of efforts that the Benton County Health Department, the university, and so many others are engaged in institutionally, but also that we should each personally be engaged in. I know you will be considering an expansion of your emergency declaration in a few minutes. I would offer, as I did last week, my very strongest encouragement that county leaders join the university, and I hope the city council tonight, in establishing a strong leadership communications to our community that we should each participate in these public health measures. And one way to expand that is by amending your current emergency declaration to include a limit on outdoor social get-togethers of no more than 10 people. It's not about enforcement. It's about us leading as individuals and in this respect and how we gather both indoors and outdoors. Share any time we have remaining with Lilia and then open the floor to any questions if you have any. Thank you to each of you, and certainly thanks to the Benton County Health Department.
Thank you, Steve. Lilia?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Malone. Thank you, Steve. I think what I'll do is maybe emphasize a few of Steve's points this morning instead of sharing some of the work that the Joint Information Center has been doing since I have been reporting a little bit more frequently to the board. So Steve mentioned being proactive in our communication strategies. I can't stress that enough. We have a work group between OSU, Benton County, and the city of Corvallis. And really, the goals that you're looking at here, our strategies and our tactics have evolved into a living document. We're meeting, I think, every other week and updating each other about where we are with our campaigns, how we can amplify each other's campaigns and each other's work. So we really are trying to be proactive. One piece that Benton County is advancing a little bit earlier this year is messaging around flu shots. We are trying to encourage our community to get out there and get that flu shot in September of this year. And that'll bring me to one of the second points that Steve mentioned, is really trying to get the public to engage with us, whether or not they're going to engage. And so we really have been trying to emphasize that public health is a shared responsibility. We talk a lot about how the community can help us keep Benton County open and use that kind of frame. And I think that one of the most recent tactics that we have launched as a Joint Information Center that really engages with the community is some of our data dashboards. We've been hearing over the last probably 2 or 3 months some interest from our community members for a little bit more longitudinal, a little bit more segmented, a few more demographics to our data. And so just last week we launched actually 3 dashboards. We have 3 more to launch, and so I think that as Steve mentioned, you know, we can create these great communication strategies and tactics, but we really need the public to engage. And so one of the ways that we're engaging to the public is just by trying to really be responsive and receptive to the data and information that they want us to be more transparent about. And then I think lastly, I'll just maybe emphasize that you know, being a leader in promoting proactive public health practices. Of course, by having a health department, that is one of our functions, to be a leader in public health. But I want to just underscore that our mass distribution event on August 22nd we managed to distribute 53,000 masks in one weekend. And that is after the work of our vulnerable populations group that's connected with community organizations, as well as after the work of our economic development office that had collected with local businesses. We're continuing to have post-distribution pickup sites. And so I think that by having not only that very targeted upfront early outreach, but by having the mass distribution event on August 22nd really in sync with the city of Corvallis's Mask Up campaign that went on city buses and over a banner over Harrison during that same week. So I just wanted to, like I said, maybe not reiterate some things that you've heard from me before, but really just try and underscore that proactive element as well as that public engagement element. So I know we're tight on time this morning, and if there's anything else that you'd like for me to speak to, I certainly can, but I thought I might open it up for questions at this point.
I guess,
Sam?
one question. I know that on the OSU website, there's a lot of detail and detailed documents about reopening and strategy and plans, but I think that one of the things I'm hearing the most about from people is wanting to know more about the OSU testing and quarantine strategy. And so I think that it would be very useful to be more transparent about that and make sure that people are aware that there are definitive plans and a little bit about the nature and the scope. I think that, as you mentioned before, we are likely to see an uptick in numbers of COVID positive with students moving into town and into those residence halls. I think we should be really clear about that, and that we expect to see it and what our strategy is moving forward. Because people here just are very anxious and uncertain at this point. So I laud you for the generic information campaign, but I think there's a desire for something more than just that generic messaging about how everyone can help.
Steve, is there anything you'd like to respond, or I'm happy to chime in first if you prefer?
So, Commissioner, thank you. Before this meeting, we had a meeting on that very topic. So as part of the rollout beginning today and this week, the President's communication to the student body, the op-ed, media news releases that we'll be doing this week will go into detail about the on-campus prevalence testing that we'll do weekly, as well as what we have developed a dashboard which will indicate how many faculty, staff, and students are tested, what the results are, and we'll be describing how we have to date reserved one entire residence hall as an isolation or quarantine center on campus, and we'll provide for even more isolation if necessary. The work we'll do is share with the community about the ongoing, as I said earlier, wastewater surveillance testing throughout the city of Corvallis, as well as locational testing around sororities and fraternities. That's all off campus. The on-campus wastewater surveillance will also continue on a weekly basis, and those results will be publicized on a weekly basis as well.
Thank you.
We'll also share what our response plans are if there are any spikes or if we encounter outbreaks.
And I would add that the communications work group has certainly discussed messaging around move-in, and we definitely have plans for messaging around move-in, as well as within the Benton County team, the Joint Information Center has looped back to communicable disease to discuss messaging around how we're staffing up for that influx and maintaining that over time. So certainly it is within our strategies to have on the very near radar.
Thank you, and I'm happy to hear that there will be a similar data dashboard at OSU as the county is standing up now.
All right, I had a question probably for Steve, but Lilia, you're welcome. In the news, we hear institutions of higher education that aren't doing well, North Carolina, Alabama, et cetera. Are there examples of schools that have reopened ahead of us that are doing fairly well, that maybe don't get as much press coverage as the negative ones?
Commissioner, yes, there are. I would offer as a former blood-sucking newspaper publisher and editor from 1975 to 2011, the nature of the media, and I still consider myself, although not a practicing member of the private sector media, still I'm a journalist by genetics, I guess. The nature is to point out what's wrong versus what's right. It isn't that headlines sell copies, it's clicks today. So what you would see in some communities is where the communities of a county or a city or a university have actually collaborated. That's what we're doing with Benton County. That doesn't make news. In the case of University of North Carolina, I could share with you that they actually made news this week by establishing a collaboration between the university and the city police department, and in terms of responding to matters of community concern if there was a party. I know law enforcement nor does the county wants to be COVID-19 police, but that's an example of a collaboration. There are more than, I think, 2,000 colleges and universities across the nation, and we've heard about 30 to 40 cases of really bad things happening. There's probably 1,860 to 1,960 stories that we haven't heard. So where are things going well? Oregon State remained open throughout throughout spring term, I should say. Remained open throughout the summer. Students were in residence in Dallas, and we saw, with the exception of 1 week in July, sewage surveillance at a low level of positive cases. In the third week of July, that spiked and then immediately went down. So that's an example of good news that doesn't get reported. Eugene is another example. We've had positive examples of collaboration between Lane County, the city of Eugene, and the University of Oregon, and honestly, that hasn't made news.
Okay, thank you. I guess one other question. My understanding is the dorms are going to be open at less than 50% of capacity. I think I've heard you talk about approximately 2,300 in the dorms, or maybe a little less. Aren't those mainly undergraduates that will be doing most of all of their classes online?
So the majority of our students who reside in residence halls are freshmen and sophomores. We collaborate with the manager of the gym, and those are older students or adult housing around the Orchard Corridor, older students, some with families. So to answer your question, yes, we have to understand about students today. A freshman may be 24 years old. a freshman may be 18 to 20 years old and just transferred from Benton or Lane or Portland Community College. And in the pandemic, they don't have a place to go. Their grandparents have moved in with their parents. Their older brother or sister lost their job and moved home and now are in their bed. Their parents are both working from home and consuming bandwidth. And so the students who are choosing to reside in their residence halls, in the Oregon State University residence halls, are doing those for both personal reasons and in some cases financial reasons, in some cases family reasons, and quite honestly in some cases because even though there's a global pandemic, they have experienced not being able to graduate from high school, not being able to work, not being able to see their friends, and they're looking for a college experience. What we as members of the Benton County community, Corvallis community, and the Oregon State community are making very explicit requirements on our students while experiencing a very different college experience, while living on campus for whatever those reasons are that they cannot or choose not to live at home, wherever home is. They have expectations that they will follow. And those are quite different than ever before. And so for the 2,000 or so that do come, that's about 40% of our overall occupancy. They will be different students than you've ever seen before.
Okay, thank you.
Well, if you have any other questions about the communications plan, certainly let me know. And I will continue to report out as part of my standard Joint Information Center updates in the future. Great, thank
Great.
you.
All right. Hearing no other questions on 3.1, we'll go to 3.2, discussion on possible approval of updated COVID-19 pandemic emergency declaration. Are you leading that discussion, Vance?
I can certainly kick us off. As you're all well aware, last week the updated, clarified emergency declaration was put before you with the objective of adding that the Board of Commissioners would urge and encourage citizens to limit their outdoor social gatherings to 10. It was pointed out at that time that social gatherings and social get-togethers have different meanings. So I believe the consensus was from the board at that time to change the language from social gatherings that you're discussing a limit of 10 to social get-togethers.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure that was the one thing that I took away that was set in stone, and I've made that change to the declaration.
Would you explain the legal difference between those two phrases?
Hi, this is Danielle. I think we lost sound on our end.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Danielle. Vance just stopped talking, though.
Oh, Vance never stopped talking.
Make sure.
Danielle, can you hear me? This is Lilia.
For what it's worth, Vance is on mute.
Yeah, Vance, but these mics should be on.
The mic doesn't connect to the Polycom.
Yeah, okay.
Oh.
So, turn your mic on and let them know that we'll be right back, please, and thank you.
Is that better? But now I've got the feedback, right?
Yeah, oh, can you
This is the Board of Commissioners office. This is Johnny. Can you hear me?
My mic's off on the
Go to?
computer, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're just gonna reset the phone real quick. We'll be right back. Okay.
Thank you, Genevieve.
Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
I can smell smoke.
To
even
enable
in here.
audio control, this conference will now be recorded.
Good morning.
we're gonna
Can you
smell it
hear
for a
us here
while.
in the boardroom now?
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
Can you hear me?
Vance, you're gonna need to talk a little bit louder.
Oh, really?
There's your mic.
Oh, all right.
This mic is for the meeting.
Sure. All right. Can you hear me now? Yes, okay, I see Nick saying
And-
yes. Okay, so just to recap, at the last board meeting, the board had reached a consensus that we would change the language from social gatherings to social get-togethers. Commissioner Malone has asked for a legal definition. I don't know if that's a legal definition or
Any
a
kind of definition.
that we're using now to distinguish types of gatherings.
That distinction is in the executive order from the governor.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
That's why it's not technically a legal distinction. It's a nuanced decision. Social gatherings as used in the executive order refers to more formalized groupings, religious services, restaurants, organized recreational activities. Those are social gatherings. I think to put it in a context that's more familiar to Benton County, we have a county ordinance that regulates social gatherings, which are more organized events that typically have a start-stop time.
Sponsored events is another way.
That's another way to put it. I'm not sure restaurants fit under sponsored, but you get the message. Social get-togethers, really, if you're thinking about drop-in visits, things that are spontaneous, that have no organizational connection, those are social get-togethers. They're very much more spontaneous and far less structured. So the direction from the board was to change our directive from social gatherings, which again is the religious settings, the recreational events, the sponsored events, to social get-togethers, so that it is aimed more at the spontaneous drop-in events, which the governor's order does not regulate. Last week, we had a conversation about altering the language from urging and encouraging residents to not hold social get-togethers. I'm sorry, I'm going to pause every time I say social get-togethers, because that just doesn't roll off the tongue very easily. Social get-togethers to 10. The board had a conversation about altering that language to make it mandatory that the cap of 10 would be in place, which would then flow to law enforcement and through law enforcement to the district attorney office for enforcement. You asked to come back to have a further discussion on that. I have asked the sheriff, the chief of police, and the district attorney to be participants in this phone call so they can give you their perspective on what a mandate of 10 in a social get-together setting would mean to law enforcement. Because while OSU is asking you to consider this, again, it goes back 5 months since we began the pandemic. The real work comes in enforcement. Whether we like it or not, that is the other side of this two-sided coin. So it's worth having chief of police, the sheriff, and the district attorney weigh in on that aspect of this particular question. So I will turn it over to John Harrelson, or back to Chair Malone.
Well, that's where I was headed. So, John Harrelson, our DA, if you're ready to weigh in on this, we'd like to hear what you have to say.
I am, thank you. I want to first acknowledge that there have been a number of different areas that have been identified in what we've heard this morning with regards to the history of collaboration, with regards to being leaders in the areas of health, with regards to the market growth for raising public awareness and to help prepare our community for students that are returning to campus. The issue that I wish to speak to is pretty narrow by comparison, because it really does focus on the impact of mandatory language versus language that supports taking the best possible actions that we can take. And to be clearer about that is whether this is intended or not, if the county is adopting a mandatory order that expands beyond the scope of the governor's order, that by statute that would create a legal construct which would in effect codify and criminalize a rule that is being promoted by Oregon State University for its students. And I know that's being done with good intent. However, that is the legal implication. And so I would, based upon that, really invite us all to think about whether or not that is truly the intention, because at the end of the day, the law enforcement agencies will have legal responsibilities with respect to what they must respond to. The second part of that, of course, is to ask ourselves whether or not there are already in existence legal options or alternatives for the scenarios that are of concern. For instance, if there is a scenario of concern where individuals are creating dangerous situations, now I'll use the example of the party scenario, that could easily fall within the language of the disorderly conduct statute, which is a B misdemeanor. The violations of Chapter 401 related to emergencies are C misdemeanors, and yet both would be criminal acts, which again would obligate law enforcement to take a particular type of action with respect to those. I think the challenge before us, if I may speak frankly, is that the inherent nature of the university's business it depends on gathering of people. In fact, the inherent nature of many different types of institutions depend upon that. I fully understand that. At the same time, we also know that when young people gather, that it is predictable that they will party, and they will get together, and they will engage in higher risk type of behaviors. We've seen that happening across the country. And to push back a little bit, I don't accept that the absence of news stories is equivalent to the fact that there have been successes. I think that it would be prudent to identify actual models that have been successful and to be able to implement those in a manner which is going to offer the highest level of protection without embracing the hope that we're going to get a better result simply by wishing for it. I want to get past this as much as everybody else does, but by the same token, I think we are guaranteed that when the students come back, that they will gather and party no matter what the rules are, and then we're going to be setting ourselves up for a criminal response to that. Is that really what we want to do? I would urge you to simply offer a strong support for what we aspire to accomplish without criminalizing the conduct. I would argue that we have the tools to be able to respond without criminalizing that conduct. Thank you.
I see the Corvallis Chief of Police is with us. Nick Early, do you have any comments on this topic?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thanks for inviting me to the meeting this morning. Steve Clark and I have had many conversations, and I think we have an excellent history as collaborators and working together in partnerships. And so I would definitely echo that our goal is for OSU to be successful. It only supports us being working together positively. The challenge I have with the issue of making it a mandatory is the impact that it's going to have on my ability to police and staffing issues right now. We are not quite realized our full potential with our staffing numbers, so we've got still about 12 of 14 of them out of patrol, and they're still in the academy and whatnot. So I don't even have the normal staffing numbers that we should. And I would submit that right now the temperature within law enforcement and the contentious nature of issues surrounding the community already are such that I don't think we have to look too far back to October to an event, and we could be in another standstill event with students over, as District Attorney Harrelson had mentioned, if it's a criminal act, that's going to require our officers to do an investigation on every single person that we would have contact with would be required to have a knowingly culpable mental state. Thereby, our officers have to figure out, did student X understand what they were doing and knowingly choose to violate the emergency exemption? And if they simply want to do what was portrayed back in October on a traffic stop with a bicyclist, our officers could be at the total standstill. So we sort of throw that into the awful but lawful category that, well, we understand that the law is that they're going to be the most positive interaction with our students. When we're already still going to a lot of parties, we still cite, we're still issuing special response notices. As I have offered to Paul Odenthal and Steve Clark, was that we can note on those special response notices or in our notes in the CAD that there was a 40 to 50 students and that the majority of them weren't wearing masks. At that point, it's not even a matter of whether they're wearing their masks or not. It's now we have more than 10 students. I would submit that it actually would be, I think, a lot more effective based on student code of conduct that is preponderance of the evidence. So more likely than not, if they created a student patrol team, or as others have mentioned, people going around and looking at parties and things, it's really truly almost a prima facie evidence that I show up and I know you're a student, and there's more than 10 students. OSU is going to have a much stronger hammer, if you will, in terms of the result for the behavior versus us creating a criminal conduct. Now we're shipping it to the district attorney's office, and we already know kind of where the district attorney's office and the criminal justice system is in that realm. So I would just end that I think there's a lot of unintended consequences that we as a community would experience trying to enforce a statute or an exemption, an emergency clause specifically for this one entity. And I would kick it to the sheriff to talk about what our lack of resources are on that spot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hurley. From the sheriff's office, is Sheriff Jackson still with us, or who's going to lead the conversation?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I am here, and I will repeat everything the BA and Chief Hurley has said. This is a very worrisome idea for me. When I was listening to Steve Clark, Mr. Clark open, I agree 100% with everything he said, and I believe Mr. Clark also said that this is less about enforcement and more about the strong message that it sends as we stand united on this, and we want people to do this thing. With that said, I would think we'd come up with a better message and better language than to put us into a corner that is, in my opinion, a recipe for disaster. One, we don't have the staffing to respond. If you create a mandatory rule, people will call in. We get calls right now because they see, so many vehicles in the church parking lot, they think they're violating something. So those calls are already happening. If you create a rule, it's going to really blow up countywide, not just on campus. And we just don't have the staffing to do that. As you know, we've been pretty much minimal staffing for years, and it's effective for us with our current workload. But we add a workload like this, and it's not gonna work. And the other thing I really want to enforce is just like Chief Hurley said, this is not the right environment for law enforcement to appear to be over heavy-handed or unempathetic or uncompassionate or being in a place because they have 11 people and not 10 with no real criminal need to be there. I think if things went wrong, I think we're on really shaky footing to begin with. Don, do you have anything, or Greg? I'm sorry, Pat, maybe your position as chair.
No, that's fine. I see Greg popping up here. Under Sheriff Riddler.
I just don't want to be repetitive, but I don't really have anything else to add besides the fact that what we are trying to do with the university and with health services and everything else is not something that law enforcement should be impacted with the responsibility of enforcing health code. It's one of those things that we ask that people obey what is good for them. And we have these circumstances now that make us even more difficult for us to go out there and interact with a society. We ask for their support and their understanding on what we try to do out there. And this just adds to the conflict that we're going to have with the public at large, and then students coming in with their ideas of they're not doing anything wrong, but studying together. There's a study group of 12 people, and somebody called the cops on them, and here they are, and don't you have something better to do? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Don't you have something better to do out there? Go arrest somebody. It just puts a burden on law enforcement that is not within their responsibility. And it's very difficult for us to continue trying to build a community trust and relationship with this added expectation of going down to the park to see a family reunion of 1, 2, 3. Oh, you got 9, you're okay. It's not practical for law enforcement purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Clark, briefly, do you have any kind of comments on what you've heard from the law enforcement side of things?
Commissioner, thank you very much, and members of the commission. I respect greatly the contributions of law enforcement in Benton County, City of Corvallis, City of Paloma, and the District Attorney's Office. Let's be clear on what the university has requested of the County Commission. The County Commission has been asked to amend its existing emergency declaration, which supports the governor's requirements and guidelines. We have asked that that be amended to include outdoor social get-togethers of more than 10 people. The governor established on June 24th of this year the following: that indoor social get-togethers of more than 10 people were prohibited. So this county has been observing that guideline through its existing declaration. We are simply asking for this county to extend its emergency declaration to include outdoor social get-togethers. The governor's guidance on July 24th specified that indoor social get-togethers means a group of individuals meeting for a common social or recreational purpose indoors. Indoor social get-togethers include but are not limited to indoor dinner parties, birthday parties, graduation parties, celebrations of any kind, potlucks, book clubs, game nights, and other social indoor gatherings. So what we have asked is to establish a leadership communication by this county that is clear that we not only support Governor Brown's guidelines for public health, we support her July 24th guidelines, which this county has been observing, but we're extending it one further step to include outdoor social get-togethers. Now, why is that important? You'll note that I have not said that this is about students. You've heard today from our district attorney, from our sheriff, from our police chief, that this is about students. I'm sorry, this is not solely about students. We do understand students like to party. When I was young, I sometimes did that too. I suspect each of you did. But our request to you is about Benton County community residents, people who visit this county, not just about students. It's just like what we established 20 to 25 years ago when we said smoking in closed settings was not okay. We established laws about that. We did that in parks, county parks. I believe in city parks. We're simply asking for that. Let's be clear about what our public health expectations are for our communities. We'll work with our students. We're asking for this county to join the university, and we're asking the city council tonight to join this university to make a statement of leadership, not about students exclusively, but about people who live and visit here. That we believe that the county's commitment to public health should extend to outdoor social get-togethers of more than 10 people. We're going to go a step further than the governor, who has, since July 24th, prohibited indoor social get-togethers. And as I said earlier, it's not about enforcement. It's about a leadership message. It's not about students, where they go to school. It's about people doing the right thing in a pandemic. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Shall we loop back to the actual wording of the declaration?
So at this juncture, I haven't sent it off to you all, but I did change, I want to say, it was the 7th whereas and the order component of the declaration to say outdoor social get-togethers. That would be, at this juncture, the changes to the declaration that you had last week, that were put before you, that urged and encouraged limiting outdoor social get-togethers to 10.
And at the same time, are we also extending the timetable?
Well, that's...
There's lots of debate on that particular topic.
Okay.
It's not an easy topic.
So we're limited to the single topic here.
Oh, no, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
So just to clarify, Benton County's emergency declaration expires at midnight on October 31st. There is, I think, a fair amount of debate as to whether it's appropriate at this point, September 8th, to extend that. I think the governors have extended the state's emergency declaration to second, third, or 4th of November. So we're roughly in sync with the state. I will point out, however, that you can always come back at any time to extend that emergency declaration or to terminate it. So if you choose not to extend it today, it doesn't mean you've closed the opportunity on extending it.
And we would definitely be back before you in early October to discuss about the possible extension at that point. If you choose not to extend it today, past October 31st, we'll definitely be coming back to you for further discussion.
If there is inclination to extend it, I would offer up December 31st as a logical extension point. That also carries you through several months without having to worry about it. So I just throw that out as a consideration.
I think that the one consideration about leaving it as is, carrying through October 31st, is that we would probably be extending again in that mid-October time period, and it would allow us the opportunity for a little bit more strong press statement about Halloween and the kinds of social get-togethers that occur around Halloween.
It's a whole different shit.
I understand. This is such a difficult issue. While I like in concept the idea of including a limit on outdoor social get-togethers at 10 so that it's the same as the indoor social get-together limit, I think that from the sake of practicality, it is really going to be a huge challenge. And so I'm very torn on that. I think that on top of that, the fact that policing is a very fraught topic these days makes it that much more challenging. And I don't wish to put our law enforcement into those conflictual situations when, at a time when we're trying to build trust and have our law enforcement officers do what we want them to do in terms of protecting us from violent crime. So I would have to say that I'm okay with the changing the language in the order and not making it a mandate, keeping the urge and encourage language.
And just to clarify, the changing the language or changing the social gathering to social get-together?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
that would mean?
at this point, despite the fact that I really want to urge and encourage everyone to minimize those outdoor social get-togethers to 10. I am swayed by the arguments of the DA and our law enforcement that it puts them in a very challenging situation, although in theory they're already in that situation with respect to indoor get-togethers. I think the outdoor will make it more challenging, not only with university students, but with the entire community.
Okay, I think the mandatory language is not appropriate, so we're down to discussing whether we want to encourage a limit on outdoor gatherings to 10 or less. Is that the topic at hand?
Commissioner Malone, what's in front of you today is the emergency declaration that's updated with the wording urges and encouraging, or urging and encourages. So that's basically the language that's currently before you today. And so we are asking the board to adopt an updated emergency declaration today. And it contains that language in addition to the language that Vance mentioned about the social get-togethers.
Putting, encouraging a limit on social get-togethers to 10 or fewer people.
We're urging and encouraging people to
limit their social, outdoor social get-togethers to 10 or fewer.
I have nothing more to add. I'm not in agreement.
I would move approval of the extension of the emergency declaration through October 31st with the changes that we made to the whereases and the points to shift from social gathering to social get-togethers in reference to those outdoor events. And yeah, that's it.
Second.
And urge and encourage or the language.
That's the language that's in the draft.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
I will take the changes out of red line. I will send them off to Teresa, and I believe for electronic signature fixation. That doesn't sound right. Put your electronic signatures on.
Okay.
So that will be dated today.
Great. Well, I appreciate the thoughtful discussion, and I think we all have the same goals, and the question we've been debating is how to achieve those goals. And like everything else for the last 6 months, it's a work in progress, and I'm sure we will have more discussion in the coming weeks. All right. Right on time, almost. 3.3, COVID-19 EOC, DOC, and Health Department Operations Report. Brian Lee, are you leading this discussion, or first up?
Commissioner Bryan may or may not be on the line. We'll have to see if he responds. I was communicating with him about 20 minutes ago, and he's got some other priorities this morning.
Okay.
He said he would join as soon as he could, if he could. If he's not available, then we should go to Danielle and Charlie.
I am on, Joe. This is Brian. I'm on.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Take it away, Brian.
Okay, so morning, folks. So obviously we had a small fire last night in LC that got put out pretty quick. There's fires all around the state. There's some big evacuations happening, mainly in Lynn and Marion, as well as Blaine and Douglas. So we're going to activate our fairgrounds as a temporary evacuation point, as a backup for overflow, mainly for folks with livestock trailers and just overflow in general. The state fairgrounds is completely full. And Lynn County is already starting to fill up, and they just opened their doors an hour ago. So it's getting busy really fast. So stay tuned for more on that. The state fire marshal said that they are completely out of firefighting resources. Every fire engine they have is out in the field right now. So if we have a fire, unless it's threatening a large population, they are unable to send any help. So we need to handle all initial attacks with our local resources exclusively. So it's a really dire situation all around the state. So just kind of wanted to keep you folks posted on that. We sent an email out to the EOC team to sort of put people on standby. We're not formally activating all of our EOC. We might just activate a few people to help with the temporary evacuation site setup. Other than that, I will keep you closely updated if there's any fires or anything that impacts Benton County. But I think a lot of employees, I know there's folks in our office, are affected by the evacuation throughout the other counties as well. And that's all I had.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I was hoping we could sneak through fire season without this kind of events happening, but we didn't quite make it. So appreciate your efforts, and I'm sure we will be talking to you some more soon. Danielle?
It's kind of ironic that this is happening. I'm having a new roof put on the house to make it more fire safe. It's amazing.
Okay. I saw Charlie Fountain and Danielle Brown. One of you, please.
Commissioner Malone, I got one other thing real quick. In terms of air impacts and weather patterns, we're expecting the wind to start to die down late tonight, so hopefully be better by tomorrow. I don't know in terms of air quality, it might be bad like this at least through tomorrow. So we had a couple questions from folks, specifically OSU, asking on the public health side if we wanted to recommend closing businesses or anything like that due to the air quality. I sent an email to Charlie about that one, but I just kind of want to keep you guys posted on that one just because air quality is so poor.
Yep. Thanks, Brian. Charlie, do you want to come next?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I've actually been out for 10 days. I've just been plugging in the last couple of days, so I think Danielle is probably in a much better position to provide an update.
Thank you. Glad you got some time off finally, Charlie.
Commissioner Malone, I would ask Charlie to address the air quality issue before you move on.
Okay. Did you hear that, Charlie?
Yes, I did. I have actually not seen Brian's specific question. I need to look into what businesses he might be referring to. So I'm going to have to look into that request. We definitely concur with the state recommendations that people with underlying respiratory conditions, cardiac conditions, limit their physical activity, limit their time outdoors. Their young children, same way. I did send information to Kelly Losi and the PIO team to include travel precautions with their public advisories. People are highly distracted by this smoke. It screws up our color perception, and so people can mistake traffic signals. People are taking a lot of pictures and need to be reminded to park or pull over. Pedestrians and bicyclists should be reminded to wear highly visible clothing, and everyone should have their lights on. But regarding specific businesses and Brian's questions, I'll have to look into what his specific question was about that.
Okay, thanks, Charlie, and we'll be on EOC, DOC report here for another 20 minutes or so, and so if you have some late-breaking news, maybe towards the end of that presentation, you can cut in.
While we still
Yeah, we'll do that. I also, at about 1:30, I need to get on another discussion with OSU, but I'll stay on this as long as I can.
Thank you, Charlie. Dan?
I have a question. The first part of the conversation was talking about flu shots and all that. Are we going to have a countywide exercise on that, and when might that happen?
Commissioner Lilia and/or Charlie can answer that question. We are providing flu shots, and I don't have the specific schedule. Charlie, do you have any information on that at this point?
It came in at an email
I'll need to
message.
pull up the HR actually coordinates that, not the health department.
Yeah.
And so Jesus did send out a schedule. It's going to be held various times as a drive-through at the 2400 building, rather than being, as we've done earlier years, at department group meetings. But I'll have to pull up that email to get those dates. But
Charlie, that's okay.
Jesus
I'll
did
just
send that out to everyone.
I'll just forward that to Commissioner Jaramillo. So, but Commissioner, similar to what we've done in the previous years, Charlie did mention one of our facilities for a drive-up location. That is actually 4500 Research Way.
Right.
And is that particular facility.
Okay, just wanted to have clarity on that.
I'll be happy to forward you the email. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Danielle?
Hi, good morning, Commissioners. Just to finish up the conversation about the flu shots, there also is planning going around with the JIC to have some expansive messaging coming out around the need for flu shots this year. So I'm sure Lilia, if she's still on, can talk about that. But there definitely is some planning around flu shots coming out as well. From the Department Operations Center perspective, we're continuing to work with Oregon Health Authority on the MOU with the community-based organizations that have been approved for contracts with Oregon Health Authority for COVID response specific to wraparound services and outreach and education for COVID to specific populations. Oregon Health Authority is working to coordinate a meeting with those identified community-based organizations so we can figure out processes for referrals and such, and have information in place so when we have the MOUs signed, we have a pathway to get individual support when they need them. So those are specific to individuals who are in response to COVID. Adding on to the conversation from Brian around the fires and the air quality, Brian and I have been in contact a couple of times this morning regarding the potential need for emergency sheltering. We do have that emergency sheltering plan in place that we created under the COVID response, under the EOC, so that is going to come in really handy. We've also talked about maybe needing some additional behavioral health supports for individuals who are experiencing evacuations and how we might be able to support those community members through the evacuation process. So I'm actually in the middle of conversations with my management, my behavioral health leadership team right now to develop what that might look like in conjunction to the behavioral health response plan that we've already created for COVID. The final thing I'll add, we've talked about this for the last few weeks, is the contact tracing and case investigation emergency hires are all in place now. They are completing their training. We expect them to be more or less independent next week with some additional supports and mentoring in place. But those should be ready to go next week. They've been going through training since they've all started. They've all been hired and identified, so we have that additional 5 FTE capacity for contact tracing that will be supportive of the CD team. So those are the big updates I have for the DOC this week.
Any questions for Danielle? Thank you, and like I said, I'm sure we will be hearing from you soon, and we've got a couple tough days with fires in our vicinity, and so those reports about fires in Southern California and other places, we are not immune from that, and it shows that I think the efforts that the Oregon Department of Forestry has been working on the last couple of years to really encourage people to, especially in rural areas, to make their homes and properties fire safe were a really good idea. And I'm sure that effort will have even more emphasis in the coming months. So next up, George Looney and a financial update. Morning, George.
I did forward this to you. It's in your email this morning.
Yep, okay. Thank you.
This is the first, this is the first actual monthly financial report. However, it only covers really, I've only been focused on the last 2 weeks of August, and we have been doing weekly up until that time. And really not anything terribly significant in the last 2 weeks of August. Majority of our expenses, as has been increased for quite a while, were personnel related. We did have some cleaning supplies and other types of supplies. One significant cost that was over our 3,000 threshold was signage for the face covering distributions, so that we had the appropriate signage in sight. So that was in there. The rest of the charges were fairly typical things like our videographer supplies. Dr. Thompson, we had another charge for Dr. Thompson as well. One additional grant that got added, and I've got to look at my note here, it was for $19,762 from the Oregon Health Association Oregon Health Authority, for flu vaccination promotion and administration. So it's not directly COVID related, but it's kind of come through that same vein. So we included it in here as a grant that has come in that time frame. That pretty much is going to be the report that I have at this point. It really was a fairly quiet 2 weeks as far as the finance side. We'll see what happens over the next month. It'll be interesting to see how this monthly process goes.
All right. Any questions for George? I guess one I had, so your monthly report will be on the second, on our goal-setting meeting, second Tuesday of the month. Is that the planned schedule?
That's the planned schedule. If you would like to move that so that, Paul, I know your goal setting agendas fill up very quickly and get very long. Moving it to the third would work. The first is our monthly closing. That's the only reason I kind of try to stay away from that. Yep. Plus, we don't really get our payroll costs in. It's very hard sometimes. The month could end, and 2 days later we're trying to get payroll, and that hasn't seemed to work very well in the past. So if it fits your schedule better, we could certainly move it. I know the goal setting, when I thought come up this week, that's not really the best timing for us. We could be somewhere else to be much more sensitive to your time.
Okay. Well, George, you've done a nice job of getting the information out to us and nice short reports. So I think my advice would be to plan on the second Tuesday of the month. That way we get the information when it's freshest.
I think that's a very positive thing. You're correct. By the time we get to the third week, we're talking about something that happened some time ago. And so that sounds great. I will look forward to talking to you in October.
All right. And I would encourage you to continue to keep your reports short and give us good news.
Can I?
I will do my best. Thank you.
Zan?
Follow up briefly with a question that probably is more for Mary than for George, if Mary is available. I would like to get a sense for how frequently we are being reimbursed by the state with CARES Act dollars, and whether or not there are any results of the audits that had been done about spending, so that we have better guidance about what we can and cannot get reimbursed for.
Yeah, I had an email conversation with the finance director from Lane County on Friday, and they haven't heard anything. However, he's had some email exchanges with the state, and initially there is no change in what they've asked for. So I think we're fairly comfortable going ahead with the way the reimbursements we ask. We get reimbursed at a minimum monthly, but it's very odd schedule. It's not on the month. They will open it up and say, okay, now we need, need everything from July 25th through August. So it's a very random, and we've now received 3 reimbursements, and then we're waiting for them to, again, to tell us when it is. So I think very shortly we'll send in another reimbursement request.
And where are we in terms of the money, the amount that they had essentially allocated for Benton County? How much have we used up?
Before the end of today, I'm back on your schedule here at the end of this. I can get more detailed information for you by then.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other finance questions? Well, thank you. Next up, Danielle Brown, 3.4, discussion and possible approval of micro shelter financial support request.
Danielle, hang on just a moment and let me just interject.
Go ahead, Joe.
Just let me interject for the board. Commissioners, there is a agenda packet on this particular agenda item. Yep. We typically don't do agenda packets or agenda items specifically for goal setting. In this case, because we're requesting the board's permission to create a new program, we did create an official agenda item for you. So I just wanted to highlight that is attached to your agenda as well. So Danielle, I do have the agenda item that you did submit, so feel free to go ahead.
And for clarification, that's for drug treatment court, yes, Joe, not for the micro shelter conversation?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was jumping ahead. You're correct, drug treatment court.
Okay.
Okay. Danielle, regarding the...
I wanted to make sure we're on the same page.
You bet. Danielle, regarding the micro shelters, are you going to be referencing the spreadsheet?
I am, yes.
Okay, are you going to be able to display that, or can you email that to us so we have it in our email inbox?
I have a copy of it, so make copies.
I can display if someone will make me the presenter, I'm not sure. I'll just go ahead and email it to you guys, that might be easier.
I'm making a presenter right now.
Jonavie's making you the presenter.
Oh, thank you, Jonavie. Sorry, this might take me just a minute to figure out. This takes me just a minute to figure out how to do this, so.
There it is.
All right. Can you guys see the spreadsheet on my screen?
Yes.
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 Okay, perfect. So we talked last week about the micro shelter support in addition to the support the county is providing to the men's cold weather shelter, specifically because of the capacity issues related to COVID with the men's cold weather shelter and needing additional beds. So in talking with Paul Bellata from the city of Corvallis, what we're looking at is a pilot project to help determine whether or not these micro shelters for the first year are a sustainable option for assisting with placement of homeless individuals in the community. This pilot project will be looked at is intended to be looked at a couple of different points throughout the next year to determine whether or not the return on investment that the city and the county is reviewing today is feasible and financially responsive to the need in the community. So the plan would be to work with Unity Shelter using their shelterware database to determine if the money that's being proposed today would really be beneficial to the long-term planning around the homeless response, which will go hand in hand with the work that is happening under the HOPE committee. So the spreadsheet that you guys see in front of you is separated into a couple of different sections. You can see on column D, there's a couple of different colored highlighted sections. The $255,000 that's highlighted in yellow is the proposed amount that Paul Bellata will be bringing to the city councilors this evening to talk about the city donating to Unity Shelter for the construction costs related to the micro shelters. So there in column D, you can see the $266,000. The difference between the 266 and the 255 is an $11,000 cost for kitchens. The original proposed budget for the micro shelters proposed a $2,200 per site kitchen cost to allow for the individuals placed in the micro shelters to have a kitchen to use. However, we have learned since this was originally developed, that the kitchens would need to be commercial kitchens, and that there would be fire concerns around these kitchens being at these unsecure micro shelter locations. So the city is proposing to build these micro shelters without that kitchen setup. So that $11,000 difference is the difference with the $2,200 per site kitchen setup. The orange highlighted section of $148,500 is the cost remaining for the social service support for the individuals at the micro shelters to assist with the case management and support. So you'll see the line 11 under site operations here is $28,500, and line 12 Personnel highlighted here is 120,000. So those two together total the 148.5 that the county is being asked to donate to the micro shelters to help with the ongoing management and support for the individuals that are placed. Again, this is being proposed as a pilot project. So at the 1 year mark, actually before the 1 year mark, probably at the 6 and 9 month mark, we'll review to determine whether or not these micro shelters are sustainable and have had the return on investment that we're hoping that they do with supporting the homeless individuals. So I'll stop there for questions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you reconciling the dollar amounts that we saw previously to firm that up, and really like describing this as a pilot project. I expressed the county's concerns with Mayor Traver last week, just their contribution is initial and construction, and ours, the county's, is ongoing. And so part of the discussion is if this is seems like it's working, how to fairly distribute the ongoing costs. So I think have made pretty good progress in pinning down the numbers and describing the project accurately. So appreciate that. Any other questions for Danielle?
The other thing I'll add to this, Commissioners, if I may, is this is CARES reimbursable, and checking with Mary Otley before we proposed this would be funding, because this is directly related to the COVID response. This would be funding that would be CARES reimbursable.
It would be CARES reimbursable up through December 30th and not beyond, but we would expect.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, it may be extended as well, that timeline. Okay. So is this an action item?
This is an action item. We are asking the board for approval to commit to the $148,000 that Danielle just mentioned a few minutes ago. Today, City Council is taking up their decision tonight regarding funding of the actual micro shelters. Commissioners, if you do decide to move forward with this today, I would highly encourage us to spend the next 6 to 9 months working diligently on a future strategy, because keeping in mind that the money that's being asked for today is in addition to the contributions the county currently provides to the Cold Men's Weather Shelter. And we have just recently received other inquiries about funding homeless services as well. So for me, I think really working with the HOPE committee and with the city to establish a strategy, and then how we're going to fund that strategy, because as Commissioner Malone indicated, this dollar amount here is, but what you're being asked for is to approve it just for this first year, not for successive years, because it is a pilot project and we need time to develop a more comprehensive financial strategy than what we have today.
And just as a reminder, the HOPE Advisory Board intends to have a draft strategy that will be out for community engagement. At this point, it's looking like October or November, so it won't be in time for, obviously, for any decisions before the next fiscal year. But I do hope that all of that planning will be in time for our biennial budget development and for the next City of Corvallis budget development. We've also heard that the City of Philomath is more interested in becoming engaged, so it should help inform their work as well. But I would be happy to make a motion to support this pilot project with a contribution of $148,500 for this first year's work with evaluation points at 6 months and 9 months.
With those comments, I'll second that.
Okay, one question for you, Danielle. You mentioned year. When does the year start?
That's a good question. In coordinating with the city, it would be my expectation that the year would start when the micro shelters are in place
Okay,
and ready for use.
so maybe towards the end of October?
That seems reasonable. I'm not sure what the timeline is for actually getting them constructed. I think they're relatively quick to construct. So yes, the end of October, beginning of November, assumingly mirroring when we would normally have the men's cold weather shelter open, which would be November 1st.
Okay.
Commissioners, I would also encourage you to make your motion contingent on City Council providing the funding for the micro shelter construction.
I will amend my motion to add that contingency.
I
Thank you.
agree.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Commissioners.
And 3.5, well, let's see. Do we want to take a 5-minute break here? I think we're slightly ahead of schedule.
Or we could do the next item, which is also Danielle, and then let her,
Oh, okay. Well, it's 45 minutes is the reason
got it.
it's up to you. I can go on. You okay,
fine.
Annabelle?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, 3.5, Drug Treatment Court Services, Danielle Brown and Mary Otley.
Okay, so I'm going to try and not start in the middle of the story on this one, so if there are questions, please ask me to back up. For a number of months, we've been having conversations with the Circuit Court around the ongoing support for Drug Treatment Court and how to sustain this program. Drug Treatment Court, about 5 years ago, was able to access an expansion grant through SAMHSA to help expand the drug treatment court programming to include what they call the enhanced track, which are individuals, supporting individuals through drug treatment court that have both substance use disorder issues and mental health issues. That SAMHSA grant, as was to be expected, did not get renewed for this biennium and moving forward. So in your packets, you have a more detailed explanation of the current programming under drug treatment court. The current funding with drug treatment court includes only criminal justice commission funding, CJC funding, which is not enough to sustain the current programming using Milestones as the service provider for the drug treatment court participants. As we began to have this conversation earlier this year, it became apparent that because of Benton County's behavioral health department's ability to have supportive financials with the FQHC, the health centers, that we had some different abilities to sustain this program without additional grant SAMHSA funding that Milestones and the current drug treatment court folks were relying on in order to provide the participants the level of programming that is necessary in order to sustain the program within the evidence-based practices that are specialty treatment courts. So what we are proposing is to have a new program developed under the Behavioral Health Division of the Health Department that will include the drug treatment court services for participants that are assigned to drug treatment court under the circuit court. The first 90 days of this program will be supported by the county until we can begin to bill for the services and catch up on the financials in order to make this program sustainable as I've proposed in the documentation that you guys have in your packet. There are two pieces of documentation. There's a program implementation plan that's a Word document, and then there is a spreadsheet that has some budget numbers that I have reviewed with Mary Otley and Jen Ambule from the finance department to verify that the numbers are accurate. So on the spreadsheet that you guys have in your packets, you'll see that the total monthly revenue proposed, given the current level or the level as of July 21st for drug treatment court participants, is $64,313.31. That's the revenue projections based on that current level of participants. The monthly costs that I've projected are $43,424.75 for our program to be fully staffed at the same level that Milestones is currently staffed at. The proposal that I'm making today is to not staff at full capacity, given that the census for drug treatment court is about half of what the projected census was, for a variety of reasons that we're working with the court on to increase that census. So the proposal today will include 3 FTE rather than the 5 FTE that is currently being staffed by Milestones. The drug treatment court, as you guys are aware, is going to be a pivotal part of the criminal justice system improvement moving forward. This is a critical component to managing recidivism rates for individuals that are engaging with this program. The recidivism rate for individuals that have successfully completed drug treatment court is a fraction of what of the recidivism rate for individuals who have just went through the normal criminal justice system. So the evidence base of this program is to really provide decreased recidivism and decreased law enforcement contact with individuals who successfully complete this program. So this does go very closely hand in hand with the criminal justice system improvement work that the county's been working on for the last couple of years. So I will pause there for questions or comments.
Any questions for Danielle?
I also have Ryushin Hart on the line, who is, he came to us in May from COI. There's Ryushin. From COI, he was hired as our drug treatment court QMHP. I've asked him to participate in a work at a class manager role should this program get approved, so we can have someone else to assist with the development of the program.
I would say just that I've been working with this team trying to ensure the longevity and long-term sustainability of drug treatment court for several months, and I am very excited that we are at this point, and I strongly support the investment of county funds to ensure a orderly transition between providers so that we can indeed reduce and continue to reduce the recidivism rates here in Benton County. I view this as a core element of our criminal justice system.
All right. I have a kind of a general question for you, Danielle, and I don't necessarily need the answer right now, but wondering if this is a trend for Benton County taking over providing services from subcontractors, I guess you call them, Milestone. There was something
Trillium.
Last fall with the school. I've forgotten the details, but just wondering if we're not, it seems like the bottom line is we're not satisfied with some of the people that we've hired outside of Benton County. Is that, so the question is this some kind of trend that we've got going?
So that is not the intended trend, Commissioner. The drug treatment court conversation really did come up out of a point of sustainability. With the limited CJC funding that drug treatment court currently has to function, it's about 50% less than what the program needs in order to be sustainable. So this was not anywhere on our radar prior to early this year in terms of needing a sustainability plan. Milestones, because we have the FQHC, the centers, the health centers that we can bill under, we have some additional capacity for revenue that Milestones doesn't have, because they are not connected to an FQHC. So it really is not the intention of the county, at least in my perspective, to take over these programs. The two that we have taken over have been out of necessity, in order to continue to have highly functioning programs and have, for this one, have drug treatment court continue to be a sustainable program moving forward. If we left it with Milestones, the current Milestones budget would allow for about 15 participants to successfully complete drug treatment court, which would be a third of what it's currently got the capacity to serve.
Commissioner, I equate this to a lifeline financially for the program. It's very evident that the program can't continue to operate, financially speaking, based on the current framework we have in place. And so changing the framework and the county bringing this under our own umbrella will generate additional revenues to make the program more financially sustainable that Milestones doesn't have the ability to do. Okay. We've been very open with them. We've had a number of conversations with Milestones, and there's no bad blood, if you will, between us. We're just trying to figure out what's the next step for this program, and we believe that this is a critical step in solidifying the funding stream. As Commissioner Ozro mentioned, this is a critical component to our entire criminal justice system. It's an important component of that larger system. We don't make it a practice of looking for ways to take over programs that are operating financially in a sustainable way. This program is not and has not been for the recent past. I would also note that Benton County used to operate this program prior to Milestones operating it, and that was, I can't remember how many years ago, 5 to 10 years ago is my guess. Mm-hmm. Danielle, do you know that time frame?
It predates me. I want to say 5 to 7 years ago. I'm not sure of the actual timeline.
I think that sounds about right from what I know. There is one added benefit to the county taking over the behavioral health and mental health treatment for the drug treatment court clients, and that is that once they end their participation in drug treatment court, they can continue with the same providers afterwards as they graduate from the program, and therefore they don't have a further disruption to the services that they're receiving, transitioning from Milestones to other providers in the community, and that increases the likelihood of their success. So, but yes, the driver here was sustainability of the program overall, making sure that we could keep it in place.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I can add some clarification. The county provided that service. It was more than 10 years ago, 10 maybe 11 years ago, and I don't remember what the reasons were for the change. I know it was there was a big kind of a blow up thing, but you're looking at completely different teams, and I think it's a good idea, fully supportive, and hopefully we can get PMP on the same page, you know.
Great. Thank you, Sheriff Jackson. Refresh my memory. Where are we in the process here?
Commissioner, you actually have two options. One is the motion that's in front of you, which is to move this topic to a future board meeting for formal approval. If you need additional time to think about it, you can certainly do that. If you don't need additional time to think about it, you can always make a motion approving that today. Mm-hmm. So it's really up to the board.
Okay. Any thoughts, Annabelle?
We might as well just do it.
I would be happy to move to approve the development of new programming for drug treatment court within the Behavioral Health Department.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, Danielle.
I have one quick question
Commissioners.
for Danielle.
Yes.
As you described it, this creates a new program within the Behavioral Health Department for drug treatment court. Would you foresee that any additional efforts that we undertake in terms of programming with the jail would also fall under this same program in your department?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the intention of those programs. I think drug treatment court is such a specific program because the participants are mandated that I think we would need to be clear that that there's a apples to apples fit in any programming that we're conjoining with drug treatment court, and not just putting it together because they both kind of fall under a forensic type programming. So I think potentially yes, but I do think it also depends on what the nature of that work is.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, I would like to recognize Danielle. We have been working diligently on this. We started this discussion earlier this year, and we really couldn't pick it up until the last 60 days because of the coronavirus. But Danielle has been working in the Emergency Operations Center, and now she's migrated to the Department Operations Center. And in the midst of all of that, she's not only been running her department, but she's also been working on this proposal as well. So thank you, Danielle, for all of those efforts.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Do we want to take a 5-minute break now?
I think so.
The way I see the morning playing out, we've got 2 items, 3.6, 3.7, with Lilia, and that's probably a good time for a lunch break. So you need a break now.
Commissioners, at about 11:45 for 3.6, we'll be having several people join us for that discussion. So since we're moving a little bit quick this morning, I might ask if we do 3.7 before 3.6 to allow folks to get time to join the meeting after our break.
Oh, sure, okay.
Thank you.
So you're saying next up is 3.7?
Yes.
Okay.
The folks for 3.6 are not planning on joining for about another 45 minutes.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So how long a break are we taking?
5 minutes.
That's fine.
How long is a 5-minute break?
How long is a 5-minute break?